All right, Fox on top of a tax cut push that could be slipping away, but for not the reasons you think. Another bombshell development today, this time centering on the Republican nominee for Alabama Senate, Judge Roy Moore. Now, he's facing accusations of an inappropriate sexual encounter with a 14-year-old girl back in 1979. He says it's not so. Regardless, already a number of senators are calling on Moore to step aside if the claims are indeed true. We're about to hear from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who's hoping that everyone would be focusing on the unveiling of the Senate tax cut bill today. And House Majority Whip Steve Scalise, he's going to be here. While he's confident that no matter what happens with Moore or other developments on the Hill, these tax cuts do get done. But all of this has complicated things mightily. And doesn't our Chad program know it with the fallout from Capitol Hill? Hey, Chad.
Hey, how are you? So in just the past hour or so, the House Ways and Means Committee has taken the first formal step. They have approved the bill out of committee 24-16. It was a party line vote, which was expected. This now goes to the full House of Representatives, probably to the Rules Committee next week. The Rules Committee is the gateway to the House floor, and you could have some changes there. Those changes could be to court members who aren't quite on board yet. Again, they haven't quite worked out all the state and local tax deductions. I was just talking to a senior source who indicated they need to make sure some of the California Republicans are on board. They can only lose 22 Republicans in the House of Representatives, and if everything is lined up, then maybe they'll vote on this on Thursday or Friday next week. Now, you talk about Roy Moore. That's the next factor here in this. You had Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, Cory Gardner, the chairman of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, Republican senator from Colorado, both say if these allegations are true, he should drop out of the race. We'll have this special election on December 12th. That's about the time that we think the Senate might be voting on this. If you have a vacancy or Doug Jones, the Democratic nominee, wins or something else happens, this is just one of these other wild cards. Passing tax reform, Neil, it's a very complicated matrix, and this is another variable. You know, some people thought that you might actually be better off with Doug Jones because you at least know he might not vote for this bill if he wins. The Democrat Roy Moore's campaign, when I had spoken with them initially a couple of weeks ago, they said they had nothing to offer on tax reform, and then they indicated to me that he was all in. So this is another factor, and keep in mind, this is the math. 52 Republicans in the Senate. Rand Paul, the now injured Republican senator from Kentucky, who's supposed to come back next week, he was a no on the budget framework for tax reform, so you're not quite sure where he is. And if you don't know where Roy Moore is, or if he's even the candidate, and you don't know if Doug Jones wins, if he's the person who wins in December, that changes everything. There are there's a lot of clouds in the crystal balls right now on Capitol Hill, Neil.
What do they do if you don't know the status of two U.S. senators? Now, in the House, typically, then you factor that into the majority you would need if a number are out either for sickness or they're traveling or they're just predisposed. What are the rules in the Senate?
Well, you just go ahead and vote, and if you don't think you have the votes, you probably don't vote, and that's where some people think that this, could drag into next year.
But are the votes based on a Senate of 98 members? You know what I mean?
You just go and vote. There's always, it's hard to get 100 people in the same room at the same time, and on most days, unless there's absences, unless there's extenuating circumstances, there's always a couple of people who are.
But by that definition, then, if it's 49, right, then that's what it would be. It would have to be a minimum of 49 votes in that event.
That's right. A simple majority, right. And we haven't even talked about potential absences if there's other health issues with Thad Cochran from Mississippi, who was out for a time, John McCain from Arizona. And the other wild card here is Bob Menendez. He is on trial. Jury is deliberating. Democrats would need that vote.
Thank you very much, my friend. Chad, encyclopedia program, he's the best. All right, I do want to go right now where the Senate leaders and some of the administration's top economic officials, it looks like Gary Cohn is there and the Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. Let's listen.
Thank you.
Leader McConnell, do you believe these women who've made on-the-record accusations against Roy Moore, sir?
Thank you,
Leader McConnell.
On taxes, can you guarantee that no one in the middle class will see their rates go up?
Leader McConnell, what more information do you need here to decide if these allegations against Roy Moore?
It is very, very hard to hear that. I apologize, but we did want to show you this. They are meeting here. The Senate has introduced its plan. I think you know some of the raw details here. They're delaying the corporate tax cut. That is the cut that takes rates from 35% to 20%. It won't be happening next year as the House plan has. It would happen the year after that. They have some other little goodies in there that might or might not be your cup of tea, including one that takes the top rate down from 39.6% to about 1% under that, keeps about 7 or 8 active rates. Wall Street was crunching through all of this today, finished down about 100.5 points. I'm telling you, it was a lot worse earlier when we were down about 250 points. So again, how they iron out these differences, anyone's guess. Let's go to Blake Berman, Fox Business Network fame, of course, at the White House. What do you think? What are you hearing on this?
Well, you know, you just showed the chart there of the markets, Neil. The markets took a downward turn today at the first sense that this corporate income rate on the Senate plan would be a 2019 event, not being phased in at 2018. That's what the Senate plan calls now for this tax rate to drop in 2019. Speaking to Maria Bartiromo earlier today in New York City, the Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, who you just saw in that video there, he left open the door to the possibility of a corporate rate phase-in. Listen here.
The House and Senate are having to look at how we pay for all of this, including a major focus of the president, his middle-income tax cuts. So these are things that are still being discussed. Obviously, right away is better than a year, but a year is better than, obviously, a longer phase-in.
All right, Neil, some details now on this Senate plan. We'll start with the individual side. It calls for 7 brackets like the current law. You see it there, the bottom at 10% with the top rate at 38.5%. This differs, though, the Senate plan from the House plan, which trims it down, the House side, down to 4. The Senate plan also includes $1 million cap on mortgage interest deduction. The death tax exemption would be doubled and not eventually repealed like the House version. Property taxes also would not be able to be deducted like the House version. The chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Kevin Brady, just said moments ago he is not worried about the differences in plans.
Because we came together with President Trump on a unified framework, we are all shooting toward the same target. Will there be some differences? Of course. That's the legislative process.
Now, both plans, Neil, do call for a full elimination of state and local income taxes. But one of the outstanding questions going forward here is this corporate tax cut rate. 20%. We know that'll be the number. That has been the red line that the president has laid out. When, though, is the case? The Senate plan, if they get their way, would be in 2019. Neil?
All right, buddy, we'll see how they'll digest that. As you know, of course, the markets were whipsawed today, trying to get a handle on this. Of course, the big selling point for these tax cuts seem to be their simplicity, that you could fill them out on a card here. I got the card here that they use. Can you see that? And that's great. But, you know, I want to go to my buddy Charles Payne of Fox Business Network. Here's the problem with that argument, though. I think most Americans, Charles, would prefer on whatever vehicle they end up finishing their taxes to have more take home. In other words, that their net improves. And if it means they fill out the version of the Magna Carta, they'll deal with that rather than pay a nominal difference on one card. Your thoughts?
Yeah, listen, you're right. It's the size of the check, not the size of the form itself. And, you know, I got to tell you, a lot of turmoil because of this news today, a lot of rumors, a lot of scuttlebutt, the Senate and the House that were competing plans, and the delay in the corporate tax bill, you know, the corporate tax rate. Neil, the reason why that since shutters down the spines of Wall Street, if you will, is because even though it's $100 billion savings, it has what we call a multiplier effect. Businesses can hire more, they can invest more, and that ripples throughout the economy. It means higher wages, and that's what really gets a groundswell of economic growth going. So also, let's admit it, you know, Wall Street, like almost everybody watching this show, becoming a little bit worried and disenchanted with GOP leadership down in the Congress. I mean, they've already struck out big time once. They can't afford to do it again.
In the end, I just think people are, the longer they can stew about this, the more they're going to stew about this and realize, I like the simplicity thing, yada, yada, but I think a lot of them are saying, I'm not seeing the savings I thought. I'm not seeing the net, you know, sort of gains I thought I would see from this. And I don't know if that's going to hold well.
Well, state and local tax deductions, you've got a lot of folks in this neck of the woods, in these necks of the woods that are going to pay a lot more money. 7 tax brackets? Give me a break. Are you serious? You said there would be 3. I mean, 7? So you're right. You know, at the end of the day, it's not how simplistic it is. It's the bottom line. A lot of promises have been made, and people want those promises to be fulfilled.
All right, buddy. Thank you very, very much. Charles Fain, he is right on that. Simplicity isn't always a winning formula. All right, well, coming up, I want you to picture something, and this might distress you a little bit, but me working out. No, seriously. Me telling you to get on a treadmill more. I do this every day. That was just a few hours ago. Now, I would never give you this type of advice, but imagine my surprise when I heard that House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi was complaining about how Republicans were doing this in secret. Look at this.
We want the American people to know. Clearly, they do not want the American people to know. That's why so much secrecy, such a short fuse, because time is their enemy.
Really? Let's go back in time. This is the same Nancy Pelosi who was saying this when
we have to
crafting
pass
Obamacare.
the bill so that you can find out what is in it away from.
You know, that's what I think of when I think of something being watered down. The Titanic! So when I heard the Senate take over this measure here where they're going to try to water down what the House came up with, I think of the Titanic! Watered down from something that's already watered down is something that doesn't leave very much left for you or me or just upset. Our market pros are here. Jonas Max Ferris, Alan Nuckman at the CME, and Catherine Rooney-Vera. Catherine, watered down worries me. This is already watered down. What are we left with?
Neil, it worries the market too. The market fell just because of one thing, and that was that 1 year delay. The market wants tax cuts, Neil, and they want them now. They don't want them in a year and a half. They want them yesterday. So there was a bit of disappointment. I will tell you, Neil, that if they keep it at a 1 year delay, it's not going to be all bad, and the market correction will be temporary. This is not the start of a major correction.
But you hear that bell from the Titanic ringing over with Alan Nuckman. Alan, I'm not imagining that Titanic bell. Your thoughts?
This was sausage making at its finest today. Right. The market said that's worse. We're down 1%.
I'm working on the Titanic.
That's nothing. Right. 1% is nothing. We ended up finishing up down 0.5% on the day and above where we opened. So let's talk about what didn't happen. The VIX moved up a little bit, but it's still at the 10 handle. Bonds were actually negative, and gold was up $4. There was no flight to quality fear, so everything is fine.
Okay, whatever you say. That's an iceberg ahead, just so you know. Jonas, what do you think?
Everything's fine because they haven't watered out the corporate tax deduction. The corporate tax rate drop is still on the table. That phases in a year or two or whatever. That's still, when you invest in a stock for corporate earnings over 10, 20 years, that doesn't really matter. So it's not a bad situation yet, but it is getting watered down. You know, at the end of the day, Americans like their mortgage deduction up to $1.1 million with HELOCs. No other country really does that. And yet our corporate tax rate doesn't match other countries, so we're losing business to them. We need to equalize this somehow, but people don't want to give up what they're already got, and they don't want to have to sell a house into a market where the buyer won't be able to borrow $800,000. I think it played a role in the elections in a lot of those high home price states because people don't want to lose this. They don't want to lose. They don't like the talk of the 401k reduction. They don't like not being able to deduct their taxes. And then also, the AMT thing.
I'm telling you, Kevin, what's going to be the surprise here, I'm not right or left on this, but some of the most consequential tax cuts in our history, going back to JFK's, or whether you're talking Ronald Reagan's, or even George Bush's 2 waves of tax cuts when he took over. The fact of the matter is they've got to be substantial enough to move the needle here. And I think a lot of people are going to discover in this bid for simplicity that simply put the net gains on this, what you're going to see in your net paycheck won't be much, and I think that's going to be a big deal. What do you think?
Neil, the biggest deal here is that they have to be permanent. They must be permanent. The market will correct and will.
There's no such thing, by the way, as permanent in Washington.
If they're not permanent, the market goes down at least 10%.
Really? Okay. Well, that's looking likely to me. Alan, what do you think?
The corporate tax rate has to drop.
Picking the top of this market is a fool's errand, in my opinion. I like Apple. That's going to benefit the most from this. Think about this. They've got $260 billion in cash that they can put to use. They could use that money and buy Netflix and Disney tomorrow and still have money left over. So that stock's going to 193, going to at $1 trillion value. With that cut, it's only going to help them.
All right. Now, let's say the cuts aren't as substantial as people hope. Again, back to my original argument. I'm not trying to, douse these guys. I am just trying to say, I know the restrictions they're working with, but I tell you, I talked to my staff on this, and I asked if they had a choice between filing out simple taxes on a simple card like this versus seeing more improvement in their net, substantial improvement in their net, regardless of whether it was an index card or something that went 50 pages. You know what they picked? The bigger net pay improvement. And that is something that's not about simplification. It's about simple demand to get more money. And I don't know if they're going to get much more money. Jonas, what do you think?
You're 100% right. No one's doing these paper forms anyway. It's either your accountant or software. You don't really care. It is complicated, but nobody cares. They care about deductions.
But to get there, you're getting rid of a lot of stuff that's going to, by nature, make the cut smaller.
It's scaring people. I'm getting emails from clients like, what about the 401k contract? It's not even on the table anymore, and they're still worried about it.
He sounds naive, doesn't he? Like the Titanic captain saying, oh, there's no iceberg out there.
I haven't been naive for the last 8 years. We've been on an upward path, and earnings are doing very, very well.
All right.
You're naive. Apple's already paying the low tax rate, so they're not going to benefit.
All right. One more
Neil,
bell.
what people should really like is that small and medium enterprises are the primary generators of jobs in this country.
Guys, thank you all very, very much. We shall see. I don't know. Meanwhile, I want you to watch something. You see this video? It shows what a crucial player House Majority Whip Steve Scalise is going to be in this tax cut fight. Moments ago, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin and the economic team of President Trump ready to rumble now because the Senate plan is out. It is ready to be compared, contrasted, and fought over with the House. Steve Scalise telling me moments ago, let's do this. Congressman, welcome. Everybody wants to know, it's the subject of the moment, who won that scooter race between you and Congressman Sam Johnson?
Well, Sam Johnson's a friend. He's a war hero, but boy, he was an Air Force pilot, and he had afterburners on that scooter. He just took off, and I had no shot. So, you know, it was a fun time, but we're going to miss Sam. He's retiring from Congress, but what an American hero he is.
87 years young. You know, obviously it was meant to honor Capitol Hill Police as well. It had a serious intent. You ever look back and when you saw them being recognized of what could have been?
Well, you know, you just look at what happened at Sutherland Springs and just a horrible tragedy that we're all still mourning, and I'm praying for those families. Our baseball practice could have turned out the same way if we didn't have Capitol Police there. You know, David Bailey and Crystal Griner right away were able to engage the shooter and stop him from shooting at us. And it saved my life, and it saved the lives of a lot of other members of Congress. So I have nothing but the ultimate respect for the heroism and bravery of our United States Capitol Police and all law enforcement.
You know, sir, I was thinking of you in light of this latest Rand Paul development that the senator was, you know, beaten up and pretty severely banged up by a neighbor in which 5 ribs are broken. Do you think, now I know you're in leadership in the House, so you have automatic protection, that we need to re-examine protection for our congressmen and women and senators?
Well, I know a lot of people are looking at their own security procedures, as they all should. You know, and it's a shame that we've come to this point where you have some people who think it's acceptable to resort to violence to settle political disagreements. It's unacceptable to do that, and we've got to get back to a more civilized society where we go and debate our ideas vigorously. That's what makes our country great. But again, there's no excuse to resort to violence.
You know, I was mentioning the Senate as well, and of course I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about their plan that's competing with your plan to try to meld the two. And the big differentiator seems to be delaying the corporate tax cut. The Senate is looking at pushing it back to 2019. How do you feel about that?
Well, in our bill, we've been working really hard to make sure that those tax cuts are immediate. I'm not going to criticize the Senate because I'm encouraged that they're actually moving a bill forward. I want them to pass a bill, just like we need to pass a bill. But when we passed a bill in health care out of the House and they fell 1 vote short, it was a huge disappointment for all of us. This time we need to get it done. President Trump is all in on these tax cuts. They're going to create jobs. They're going to bring jobs back to America. We need to get a bill on President Trump's desk. Ideally, by the end of the year, let's work out the differences, but the main focus has to be on cutting taxes for everybody, personal and corporate, so that we can bring jobs back to America and get our economy moving again.
You know, they've got a 7 tax bracket structure. You guys have 4. They bring the top rate down from 39.6% in your measure to about around 38.5%. There are other differences and what have you, but how do you feel about that? I mean, that alone is pretty big different ground to sort of cover.
Well, again, you know, the Senate's going to have to figure out how to pass a bill that achieves the main goals of cutting taxes and getting the economy moving and bringing jobs back home. We're going to do the same thing in the House. If there are differences, which there will be, we'll work them out. But look, in our bill, we simplify the tax code so much that over 90% of Americans could actually do their taxes on a postcard or an app if you're, you know, a young kid who's got those smartphones like a lot of us do. But the bottom line is we've got to simplify the tax code and cut taxes and create jobs. That's what our bill does in the House. I would imagine the Senate's going to go a little bit different route, but ultimately focus on the same thing. And then the key goal here is to get a bill on President Trump's desk, which he wants on his desk so that he can sign it and get this economy moving again.
The president seemed to hint with some folks while traveling in Asia that when he made that call, to Senate Democrats, that he kind of likes what the Senate's cooking up more than what you guys cooked up. What did you think of that?
Well, you know, when we filed our bill last week and we had a formal rollout, the day we filed the bill, President Trump invited us down to the Oval Office. And he had Chairman Kevin Brady of the Ways and Means Committee and his committee there with our House leadership. And he said, I'm 100% behind this bill. You know, again, he can also be supportive of the Senate's bill because he knows in the end we're going to come together, the House and Senate, on a bill that cuts taxes for families, rebuilds the middle class, brings jobs back to America, and he'll sign that bill. The differences will be worked out, but the key objectives for both of us are to lower taxes for people of all income brackets and to bring jobs back to America. Our bill surely does that in the House. I would imagine the Senate's bill would have a similar impact, and then let's work out the differences and get this done.
You know, you talked about simplicity. I remember that event in the White House where you took out an index card and showed how simple it could be. And I'm sure that's a great allure, Congressman, but I talk to a lot of people who say simplicity is one thing, but I want a lower net pay. In other words, my taxes to go down, whether it's on an index card or a 50-page tax form. And a lot of people are crunching numbers, and they're chagrined to find out that with losing some write-offs and deductions in order to pay for this, that it isn't that big. What do you say to that?
Well, what you're going to see is across every income tax bracket, people are going to get a tax cut. We've been running the numbers for some individual members who have had the same question you have. And they say, geez, in my district, are people going to be paying less? And when we run the numbers, in most of those districts, every income bracket sees a tax cut. And so, look, in any kind of change in the tax law.
I know that's the nature of the beast, and I know, but
right.
Ronald Reagan wanted to make sure that everyone had a tax cut. Everyone across the board. George Bush with his tax cuts, everyone across the board, even JFK. Are you disappointed, and maybe it's just the math reality, Congressman, that everyone won't hear?
Well, right now, the problem with our current tax code is it is a series of winners and losers. Right. 10,000 pages of items where if you don't get a special interest loophole, you might have lost out. Let's get rid of those special interest loopholes and lower the tax rates for everybody. And look, I understand if somebody is taking advantage right now of an existing part of the tax code and that goes away, they're not going to be happy that it goes away. But when they look at the overall impact, most people across the board are going to see more money in their pockets. They're going to see more take-home pay. Independent analysis that are coming out on this already. The Tax Foundation says on average, people are going to see over $2,500 more in their pockets. That's a big windfall for families who have not seen their income go up over the last few years, not to mention the benefit of economic growth you get from bringing jobs back to America. You understand what economic growth is. Under the last 8 years of President Obama, we were hovering below 2% every quarter in economic growth. That's incredibly anemic. We can do better. We're already seeing, just with President Trump talking about this, you're seeing growth approach 3%. We could approach over 4% economic growth. That means more money in people's pockets, bigger economic opportunities, and pay raises for the first time for a lot of blue-collar workers who have not been able to participate in the American dream the way they will under our bill.
All right, and so you hope. You mentioned how things are going along in the House very well thus far. It seems to be in the Senate. It's anyone's guess, and it's complicated, I guess, sir, by what's going on at Rand Paul and how long he could be convalescing. And now Roy Moore, the Alabama Senate candidate, who's sidetracked by these allegations in the Washington Post and elsewhere that he had maybe initiated relationships some years back with 4 teenagers. Are you worried, at the very least, it is going to complicate getting this done in the Senate?
Well, you know, the Senate's a different body. They have a different set of rules. One of the things that we've focused on in the House is let's do the House's business and the people's business the way we can, and then send a bill over to the Senate and let them do their job. And I think you're going to find they're going to come together. I just spoke to Rand Paul yesterday because, you know, he prayed for me a lot when I was in the hospital. I'm praying for him, and I spoke to him, and he's getting better. And he wants to get tax cuts passed, too.
Did he tell you how soon he would be comfortable coming back to Washington, when he's able to?
No, but he's very engaged in this debate on tax reform. He actually asked me about a provision of our bill, something that he's interested in over in the Senate. So he's engaged in this. He's fully aware of what's going on, and he wants to be a part of this and help us get these tax cuts passed.
You know, finally, sir, Judge Roy Moore and these allegations, Mitch McConnell and some of your colleagues in the House and the Senate said it's true. He should step down, not run for the Senate. How do you feel about that?
I don't like being presumptuous, but look, these are very serious allegations. Obviously, if they're true, it's unacceptable behavior. And so, you know, let's find out more of the facts, but, you know, it's disturbing what you're hearing, and, you know, and let's see where the facts lead us.
All right. Very good seeing you again, Steve Scalise, the House Majority Whip. Continued improvement in your own health. Remarkable story. Thank you, sir.
Always great to be with you, Neil.
Same
Appreciate
here.
it.
Be well. Amazing recovery, right? Meanwhile, President Trump is getting slammed for blaming America for this trade gap with China. Why is that shocking? He's been telling us that for years. After that. You know, the mainstream media has been criticizing President Trump for blaming past administrations for America's problems with China. But, you know, those comments aren't anything new or jolting. He's been telling us that for quite some time. Take a look.
China has to pay a price if they don't start, you know, behaving, because they're killing us on trade.
We feel that if we upset the Chinese, they're going to pull their money out of supporting our bond market and paying for our debt, and then the world goes kablooey. You say what to that?
Well, what this administration doesn't understand is that we have all the cards. Our leaders are being laughed at in China. I do business with the Chinese. I think it's wonderful. I think they're wonderful people and all of that. But they're very smart, and they think our leaders are very stupid. And, of course, they're right.
Those are the days when he talked to me. That was then. Different world now. All right, we've got economist, market watcher Steve Lieb. He does have a point on this, and over the years it was a consistent point that they felt that the Chinese were schnookering us, but it was our fault for letting them. What do you think, Steve?
I think it's absolutely true, Neil. I mean, if I can paraphrase what President Trump said, he said that they think we're stupid and they're very smart. I mean, this is not something that happened under, you know, the current president's watch. This has been going on for 50 or 60 years.
Yeah,
back
I don't
in the
know where the
1950s.
alert was and all that. A lot of people, like that was switching around some other news organizations, say, well, you don't do it on foreign soil, you don't this other prior office holders there. But other office holders have done similar things in the past. I'm just saying that is not new, and he wants to change that. But the question is, can he, will he, is he?
I think you have to believe the odds are stacked against him. I mean, to reverse 50 years of history, you know, in what, 9 months, 10 months? I mean, what can you? I mean, it's far too much to ask. I mean, you just see examples of this. I mean, look at The Economist, the Big Mac Index. I mean, it's a very simple index, but it gives you some idea of what's going on with currencies in the world. And according to the Big Mac Index, the Chinese currency is more undervalued relative to the dollar than the Pakistani currency. Now, if that makes sense to you, I mean, makes no sense.
Well, none of what you just said now makes sense to me. You're so smart. But let me ask you about this. The president has always said, before he was even contemplating running for president, that we have it wrong when it comes to dealing with the Chinese on these issues, that they need us a lot more than we need them, even with all the debt they hold. Do you agree with that?
Totally. I mean, you know, we've been the seed of all the innovation. I mean, they would have no technology. They would not have probably a nuclear bomb, an atomic bomb, if it were not for us. We have given them all this. And now we've also given them, what, a $350 billion surplus in their current account because of the kind of trade policies
well, our
that
view
they
has
have.
always been, you know, and his view, more to the point, where else are they going to go? They need us. And you buy that, right?
Totally. Clearly, they need us completely, Neil. And they're just basically they disguise it so well. I mean, I don't know whether we have time, but one quick example. In the 19th Congress, in the middle of it, the chairman or the head of the PBOC, their central bank, comes out and says, well, we may have a Minsky moment in our economy. That's like a 2008 type crash. Well, a day or two before, a week before, the same guy, the same president of the PBOC said, our finances are really improving. Now, the message here is, America, don't make us raise our currency because it could collapse the entire economy. I mean, they are so good at disguise, and we've got to start doing something about it. I mean, ignore what they say. And
you are the best, my friend. You are scary smart, wicked smart.
Well,
so
thanks, Neil.
Didn't understand what you just said there, but that doesn't matter.
I'm sorry, but I mean,
no.
they're eating our lunch.
They're eating that. Hey, I understood that one, eating or lunch. All right, thank you very much, my friend.
Thanks, Neil.
All right, I want you to think quick on this. And what's the difference between these people screaming over what happened a year ago and the scene we saw at the polls 2 days ago? I'll connect, then you decide. This is a Catherine Tim alert. Still yelling, still upset, still fired up a year after the fact, a year after Donald Trump was elected president. So Republicans laugh and say they're still yelling. Well, it beats what you're doing. Because if you went to a lot of Republican polling places, see on the bottom there? No one's yelling. And you know what the problem is? No one's there. To Liz Harrington from the Washington Free Beacon, in so many Republican strongholds, you saw this play out, Liz, where, voters were few and far between. There was not much passion there. I'm not advocating screaming, but how about just showing up? What's going on here?
Well, I think you see President Trump has a very powerful effect on some segments of the left that he drives them so insane that in some cases they'll literally go out in the street and scream their head off. Or in other cases, like the heavily Democratic suburbs of Virginia that have basically transformed into Beltway DC voters, they came out in droves and, turned Virginia into a deeper and deeper blue state. And I think that's what we saw on Tuesday.
So they knew, a lot of them felt, I think a year ago or so, they would say that, boy, if we had just showed up, it could have made a difference, and we took it for granted, or we thought Hillary Clinton would win. So now the measure seems to be defined by getting out there, whether you're doing it screaming at the same time or whatever. But how long do you sustain that? Because right now, Republicans, and maybe in these a couple of states that are clearly Democratic to begin with, in New Jersey and Virginia, but it did extend a Maine on a Medicaid vote that called for an extension that repudiated a Republican governor. And we've seen it play out elsewhere, Washington State right now, where they've added some Democratic seats. What is going on, you think?
Well, I think this Tuesday was the first opportunity for Democrats to really turn out and vote in deeply blue states. I mean, the special elections, they didn't do well so far, but now you see states that have been trending blue for some time. There is a lot of enthusiasm, but the key question here, you have Virginia, which is mostly carried by those Beltway suburbs. Is anti-Trump passion enough? It is enough in those states, but is it enough for the rest of the country? I mean, Hillary Clinton couldn't win an election solely based on being anti-Trump. If the economy is doing well next year, if the Republicans get their act together on the Hill and pass some of President Trump's agenda, I mean, I think it won't be enough, just this anti-Trump fervor to win elections. But I think it's likely that Republican will see some losses, but I don't see there's any indication yet that it's going to be a wave like we saw in 2010.
Well, maybe the mutual screaming therapy. I don't know. Liz Harrington, thank you very, very much.
You bet.
All right, you don't have to scream this to realize that the media is having a field day with this story that Donald Trump personally wanted to see CNN scolded by getting it nixed from that merger deal that AT&T is contemplating with Time Warner. What's exactly right here after this?